The December wind howled down Main Street like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bite of what folks would later call the big die-up winter of '86. Ice crystals danced in the gray morning light, stinging any patch of exposed skin they could find. Eliza Quinn pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders as she stepped onto the wooden boardwalk of Dry Creek, Montana territory. The smell of wood smoke and horse manure mingled with the sharp scent of coming snow. Her worn boots clicked against the frost-covered planks as she made her way toward Morrison's general store. Each step a small act of courage. 6 months since Thomas died in that mine collapse. 6 months of dwindling savings and mounting whispers. Today, she'd swallow what remained of her pride. "Morning, Mr. Morrison," she said, pushing through the door. The bell above jangled like broken promises. The storekeeper barely glanced up from his ledger. "Mrs. Quinn. I've come about the position, the one you posted for kitchen help." Morrison's pen stopped scratching. He looked at her then, really looked. And Eliza recognized that expression, the one that weighed her beauty against her reputation like goods on a scale. "Position's been filled," he said flatly. "But the notice is still in the window." "I said it's filled." The door burst open, bringing a gust of frozen air and Prudence Bell's substantial frame. The older woman's eyes narrowed at the sight of Eliza, her mouth pursing like she'd bitten into spoiled meat. "Eliza Quinn," Prudence announced to the store at large, though only Morrison and a couple of ranch hands were present. Bold as brass, "Aren't you walking our streets like a decent woman?" Heat flooded Eliza's cheeks despite the cold. "I am a decent woman, Mrs. Bell." Decent women don't entertain minors at all hours. Decent women don't wear their hair loose like some dance hall. "I took in washing," Eliza interrupted, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Those men brought their clothes after their shifts. Nothing more." Prudence snorted. "Nothing more? Is that what you told poor Thomas before he died? Or were you too busy with—" "That's enough." The voice came from the shadows near the grain sacks, low and rough like gravel under wagon wheels. A tall figure unfolded from the corner, Silas Hart, owner of Hart Butte Ranch. Eliza had seen him in town before, but never up close. His face bore the weathered look of a man who'd spent more years under open sky than roof, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of winter sage. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale against sun-browned skin. Prudence's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Even she wouldn't cross Silas Hart. His cattle operation employed half the county, and his money kept the bank afloat. "Mr. Hart," Morrison stammered. "Didn't see you there. Just concluding some business with Mrs. Quinn." "Heard it all." Silas moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable with his own strength. "Lady needs work. You need kitchen help. Seems simple." "Well, yes, but—" Morrison's eyes darted between Prudence and Silas. "How much she owe on her account?" Morrison flipped through his ledger with nervous fingers. $8.30. Silas pulled out his money clip, counted out $9, and laid them on the counter. "That'll square it. Keep the change." "Mr. Hart, you don't need to—" Eliza began, but he'd already turned away. The door opened again, admitting Wade Mallory and 2 of his crew from the Double Bar Ranch. Wade's eyes lit up when he spotted Eliza, the kind of light that made her skin crawl. Well, the widow Quinn. Heard you were looking for work. Sweetheart, I might have something for you at the Double Bar. Something that pays better than washing." His men snickered. Eliza's hands clenched in her patched skirts. "Course, the work might require you to be on your back some." The sound of Silas's boot heel hitting the floor cut through Wade's words like a blade. He hadn't moved otherwise, just shifted his weight. But something in that small action made Wade's words dry up. "You were leaving Mallory." Wade's face flushed red. "Now hold on. Hart, just making conversation with the lady." "No lady here," Prudence interjected. Just a woman who doesn't know her place." The store fell silent except for the wind rattling the windows. Eliza stood frozen, feeling the weight of every gaze, every judgment. This was her life now, public humiliation served up like daily bread. Then something warm and heavy settled around her shoulders. Silas's coat. She realized with a start, it smelled of leather and wood smoke and something indefinably male. He'd moved so quietly she hadn't heard him approach. "Storm's getting worse," he said, addressing her for the first time. His voice held a slight catch, as if words didn't come easy. "You got a way home." I walked." Long walk to Widow Thompson's boarding house, longer in this weather. How did he know where she lived? But then everyone knew everything in Dry Creek. "I'll manage," she said, though her teeth were already chattering. He studied her for a long moment. Up close, she could see his eyes weren't just green but flecked with gold, like sunlight through leaves. "Got kitchen work at my place if you want it. Naya, my cook. She's getting on. Could use the help." "Mr. Hart." "Pays fair. Room and board included? Better than freezing in that boarding house." Prudence gasped. "Silas Hart, you can't mean to take this woman into your home." "My ranch, my business." He looked around the store, his gaze touching each face. "Anyone else got opinions about my hiring practices?" Silence. Wade found his voice first. "People will talk. Hart, taking in a young widow. Pretty as she is, folks already whisper about her. What do you think they'll say about you?" Something shifted in Silas's expression, subtle as a cloud passing over the sun. "Same thing they always say. I expect that I'm a rich man who does as he pleases." He turned back to Eliza. "Offer stands. You can ride out with me now. Or freeze walking back to a cold room. Your choice." Eliza looked around the store at Morrison's guilty discomfort, Prudence's scandalized fury, Wade's leering interest. These people would never let her be anything more than the subject of their gossip. But Silas Hart, he was offering her work, shelter, maybe even dignity. "Your coat," she said softly. "You'll need it for the ride." "Got another in the wagon." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Coming." She heard the whispers start before she'd taken 2 steps. Prudence's voice rose above the rest. "Mark my words, that woman will bring nothing but trouble. You'll see. A silent, wealthy cowboy might take pity on a rejected widow today. But what happens tomorrow?" Eliza kept walking, Silas's coat warm around her shoulders. At the door, she turned back. "Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Bell, but I believe I'll take my chances with honest work over your charity." Outside, the wind tried to steal her breath. Silas's wagon sat in front of the store, 2 sturdy horses stamping against the cold. He helped her up without comment, his hands careful and impersonal at her elbow. As he climbed up beside her and took the reins, Eliza caught Morrison watching from the window. His lips moved, and though she couldn't hear the words over the wind, she could read them clearly enough. A silent, wealthy cowboy saw a widow rejected in town, until he took her as his bride forever. Wade finished from the doorway, his voice carrying on the wind. "That's how these stories always end, isn't it, boys? The rich rancher and the desperate widow." Silas's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just released the brake and urged the horses forward. As they pulled away from Main Street, Eliza risked a glance at his profile. Whatever his reasons for helping her, they were his own. She'd learned not to question unexpected kindness. It came too rarely to examine too closely. The town fell behind them, swallowed by swirling snow. Ahead lay Hart Butte Ranch and an uncertain future, but as another gust of wind shook the wagon, Eliza pulled Silas's coat tighter and made her choice. Whatever waited at the ranch, it had to be better than the slow death of pride she'd been suffering in town. "Thank you," she said, words nearly lost in the storm. He nodded once, eyes on the white blurred road ahead. "No thanks needed, just work." They rode in silence after that, two strangers bound by necessity and winter's cruel embrace. Behind them, the whispers of Dry Creek faded into the storm. Ahead, somewhere beyond the blowing snow, waited answers to questions neither of them had thought to ask. Not yet. The first thing Eliza noticed about Heart Butte Ranch was the silence, not empty, but full of purpose. Snow muffled the world beyond the main house, a two-story log structure that seemed to grow from the earth itself. Smoke curled from 3 chimneys, promising warmth she hadn't felt in months. Silas helped her down from the wagon without words, just a steady hand at her elbow. A woman emerged from the house, round-faced and gray-haired, flour dusting her apron like fresh snow. "Naya," Silas said simply. "This is Mrs. Quinn. She'll be helping in the kitchen." Naya's dark eyes assessed Eliza shrewdly, but not unkindly. "About time. These old bones aren't getting any younger." Her accent held traces of Spanish, softened by years in Montana. "Come, child. You're half frozen." The kitchen welcomed her with heat from a massive iron stove and the scent of baking bread. Eliza's stomach clenched. When had she last eaten? Yesterday morning, the day before. "Sit," Naya commanded, already ladling stew into a bowl. "Eat first, work later." Silas had disappeared, leaving only the memory of his coat's warmth. Eliza ate slowly, savoring each bite of the rich beef stew while Naya bustled about, chattering in a mix of English and Spanish. "Mr. Hart, he doesn't talk much," Naya said, kneading dough with practiced movements. "Not since he came back from the war. But he's a good man, fair. You'll see." "How long have you worked here?" "Since before his father died. 10 years now. Just me. Mateo, he tends the horses and a few hands that come and go with the seasons." She paused, studying Eliza. "You cook?" "Yes, my mother taught me, and then—" Eliza swallowed. "I cooked for my husband and the boarding house where we lived." "Good. Tomorrow you help with breakfast. 20 men to feed when the hands are here. Today, you rest." But Eliza couldn't rest. Naya showed her to a small room off the kitchen clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and even a small window looking out toward the barn. It was more privacy than she'd had at the boarding house, where thin walls meant everyone heard everything. She unpacked her few belongings, 2 dresses, both mended multiple times, a photograph of Thomas, her mother's Bible, and the black shawl she'd worn to the funeral. Everything she owned fit in one small trunk. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Ma'am," a young voice called through the door. She opened it to find a boy of perhaps 16, Mexican features under a battered hat. "I'm Mateo. Ma'am, Mr. Hart asked me to bring you these." He held out a bundle of thick wool blankets and what looked like clothing. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake. He said you'd need them. Wyoming winter's nothing to trifle with." The boy grinned. "Naya put some things in there, too. She knows ladies need particular items." Heat flooded Eliza's cheeks, but she took the bundle. "Thank you, Mateo." "Welcome to Heart Butte, ma'am. You need anything, just holler." Inside the bundle, she found 2 sturdy dresses, simple but well-made thick stockings, a heavy cloak, and undergarments that made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. When had anyone last shown her such practical kindness? That evening, she joined Naya in preparing supper. Only 4 sat at the long table herself: Naya, Mateo, and Silas. The ranch hands apparently ate in the bunkhouse unless it was a special occasion. Silas bowed his head briefly before eating, but offered no conversation. He ate methodically, like a man fueling a machine. Eliza found herself stealing glances at him. In the lamplight, the scar on his face seemed less harsh, just another line carved by hard living. "Storm's getting worse," Mateo observed between bites. "Might lose some cattle if they drift." Silas nodded. "Check the north pasture at first light. Take Joaquin." That was the longest sentence she'd heard from him. His voice had that same rough quality, as if words scraped against something inside. After supper, Eliza insisted on washing dishes despite Naya's protests. Through the kitchen window, she watched Silas cross to the barn, his tall figure soon swallowed by swirling snow. What kind of man rescued a fallen woman without expecting anything in return? "Don't hurt yourself thinking so hard," Naya said gently. "Mr. Hart, he has his reasons for things. Not our place to question." I want to understand." "Understand what that he offered honest work to someone who needed it." Naya dried a plate with quick efficiency. "Not everything has hidden meanings. Child." But Eliza had learned that everything came with a price. Her beauty had cost her reputation. Thomas's death had cost her security. What would Silas Hart's kindness cost? The next morning came too early, the kitchen clock showing 4:30 when Naya shook her awake. Breakfast won't cook itself. They worked in companionable silence, frying bacon, making biscuits, brewing coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The ranch hands filed in at 5:30, a rough bunch who nonetheless removed their hats and mumbled polite greetings. Eliza felt their eyes follow her movements but heard no crude comments. Whatever else Silas Hart commanded, it included respect in his house. He came in last, snow dusting his shoulders. Their eyes met briefly across the kitchen, and he nodded approval acknowledgement before taking his seat. The days fell into rhythm. Up before dawn, cooking, cleaning, mending. The work was hard but honest, and Eliza found peace in the routine. Silas rarely spoke to her directly, but she felt his presence like a protective wall between her and the world's harsh judgments. A week passed before that protection was tested. She was gathering eggs when horses thundered into the yard. Through the henhouse slats, she recognized Wade Mallory and 3 of his men. Her hands tightened on the basket. "Hart," Wade called. "Get out here." Silas emerged from the barn, pitchfork in hand. He said nothing, just waited. "Heard you got yourself a new cook," Wade said, dismounting with deliberate slowness. "Thought we'd come pay our respects, maybe sample some of that fine cooking." "Kitchen's closed." Wade laughed. "Come now. Hart, where's your hospitality, boys, and I rode all this way?" "Then you can ride back." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. One of Wade's men shifted nervously in his saddle. "Now that's unfriendly," Wade said, his smile sharp. "Makes a man wonder what you're hiding. Or who—" Mateo appeared from the barn, rifle cradled casually in his arms. "Just cleaning it," his posture said, but Eliza wasn't fooled. Wade's eyes narrowed. "You know what they're saying in town? That Silas Hart's taken in the widow Quinn. Set her up real nice. Course, everyone's wondering what she's doing to earn her keep." The pitchfork in Silas's hands never moved, but something in his stance shifted. Dangerous. That was the word that came to Eliza's mind. "Get off my land. Public road runs through here." "Not anymore." Silas's voice dropped lower. "Had my lawyer file the papers yesterday. Private property now. You're trespassing." Wade's face flushed red. "You can't just—" I did. Leave." For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Wade laughed, ugly and forced. "This isn't over. Hart, that woman's trouble. You'll see, when she's done with you, when she's bled you dry." "Mallory." Silas took one step forward. "Just one. Don't come back." Wade wheeled his horse around, spurring it harder than necessary. His men followed, and soon only dust and anger remained. Eliza stayed hidden until her hands stopped shaking. When she finally emerged, Silas was gone. But Mateo lingered, rifle still in hand. "You okay, ma'am?" "Yes, thank you." He grinned. "Mister, Hart doesn't take kindly to folks bothering his people." His people? The words followed her back to the kitchen, where Naya took one look at her face and poured a cup of tea. "Drink? You're white as snow?" They came because of me. I'm causing trouble. Bah! Naya waved dismissively. Wade Mallory causes trouble because the sun rises. Has nothing to do with you. But Eliza knew better. Her presence here had shifted something, created ripples in the careful order of Silas Hart's life. That evening, she found him in the barn, checking a mare's injured hoof. The lamplight cast dancing shadows on the walls. Mr. Hart. He looked up, said nothing. I should leave. I'm grateful for everything, but I won't bring trouble to your door. He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. For a long moment, he studied her, those green-gold eyes unreadable. You running from trouble or towards something better? The question surprised her. Both, I suppose. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. Stay until spring. Snow will be too deep soon anyway. Give folks time to find something else to gossip about. And if they don't? Something that might have been a smile touched his scarred face. Then we'll deal with it come spring. He turned back to the mare, clearly considering the conversation over. But as Eliza reached the door, his voice stopped her. Lock your door at night, not because of anyone here, just habit worth having. She nodded, understanding more than he'd said. Whatever had happened to him in the war, whatever had stolen his easy words and left that scar, it had taught him that safety was always temporary. That night, as snow piled against her window and wind howled through the rafters, Eliza turned the lock on her door and felt something she hadn't in months. Safe. Not forever, maybe not even tomorrow, but for tonight, in this moment, she was safe. It would have to be enough. Mateo burst through the kitchen door just as dawn painted the sky pale pink. Mr. Hart needs you in the barn. Ma'am, bring hot water and clean rags. Eliza didn't question, just grabbed what was needed. In the barn, she found Silas kneeling beside a calf barely hours old, its mother lowing anxiously nearby. The calf's leg bent at an unnatural angle. Hold her head, Silas said without preamble. His hands were gentle as he examined the injury. Born wrong, happens sometimes. Together they worked in the half-light, Silas setting the leg while Eliza kept the calf calm. His hands moved with surprising tenderness, and when the calf struggled, he murmured soft words Eliza couldn't quite catch. Will she live? Eliza asked as they finished wrapping the splint. Maybe not. He sat back on his heels, studying their work. Worth trying, though. It was the most she'd heard him speak at once. Something about the quiet barn, the shared task, seemed to ease his usual reticence. You've done this before, she observed. Learned young. My father believed in fixing what was broken, when possible. His eyes met hers briefly. Not everything can be fixed, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond injured calves. 3 days later, Eliza was hanging laundry when she spotted riders approaching from the north pasture. Not ranch hands, she'd learned to recognize their easy slouch in the saddle. These men rode stiff, watchful. Silas emerged from the house, rifle in hand but pointed down. The lead rider, a thin man with marshal's badge glinting in the winter sun, raised a hand in greeting. Hart, got a situation. Maybe you've heard somebody's been altering brands, driving cattle across the territorial line. Heard something. Silas aloud. Lost near 50 head myself last month. One of the other riders said Eliza recognized him as Owen Murphy, who owned a small spread to the east. Found some of them. Different brand burned over mine. Professional job. Why come to me? Silas asked. The marshal shifted in his saddle. You've got the biggest herd in the county. If rustlers are working this area, you'll be next. Thought you should know. Appreciate it. There's more, Murphy said, glancing nervously at his companions. Wade Mallory's been buying up cattle. No questions asked. Paying cash. Silas said nothing, but Eliza saw his knuckles whiten on the rifle stock. Not accusing, the marshal added quickly. Just peculiar timing. Man suddenly has money to burn right when cattle start disappearing. You investigating? Need evidence. Brand changing's hard to prove unless you catch them in the act. The marshal touched his hat brim. Keep your eyes open. Hart, these aren't amateurs. After they left, Eliza found Silas in his study, a room she rarely entered. Maps covered one wall, marking water sources, grazing areas, property lines. He stood before them, lost in thought. Mr. Hart, I brought coffee. He took the cup absently. Thank you. Is it true about the rustlers? Probably. He sipped the coffee, grimaced slightly. She'd made it too strong again. Been too quiet. Weather's been hard, but not hard enough to explain all the missing cattle. Hey, you think Wade... I think Wade Mallory's too smart to steal cattle himself. But buying stolen beef, laundering brands... He shrugged. Different story. A knock at the door interrupted. Mateo entered, snow dusting his shoulders despite the midday sun. Found something, boss. You need to see. They rode out together Silas, Mateo, and two hands named Jim and Joaquin. Eliza watched from the porch until they disappeared over a ridge, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. They returned near sunset, faces grim. Through the kitchen window, she watched them unsaddle in silence. Saw Silas gesture sharply as he gave orders. Something had happened. At supper, the truth emerged. Found where they changed the brands. Mateo told Naya and Eliza while Silas wrote in his ledger. Professional work. They're using a running iron, altering the Hart brand into something else. Must have taken at least 20 head. 20, Naya crossed herself. That's theft, plain and simple. It's worse than that, Jim added, glancing at Silas. We found tracks. They're using the old Indian trail through Skeleton Canyon. Only locals know about that trail. Silas set down his pen. Someone's feeding them information. Someone who knows our patterns. When we move the herds. The implications hung heavy. A local operation. Someone they knew. Maybe someone they trusted. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She'd left town to escape trouble, only to land in more. When she heard footsteps on the porch, she grabbed Thomas's old pistol from her trunk, hands shaking. Mrs. Quinn, Silas's voice, soft through the door. Saw your light. She opened the door to find him holding 2 cups of tea, looking somewhat embarrassed. Thought you might be wakeful. Sometimes tea helps. They sat at the kitchen table, lamplight creating a small circle of warmth in the darkness. The tea was bitter. He'd steeped it too long, but she drank it anyway. You're worried, she said. Rustlers are part of ranching, but this... He stared into his cup. This feels personal. Because of Wade. Maybe, or maybe I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. He was quiet for a moment. In the war, I was a courier, carried messages between units, learned to read the land, memorize routes, notice when things were off. Saved my life more than once. Is that how... She gestured vaguely toward his scar. Confederate sharpshooter, inch to the right, and I wouldn't be here. His hand rose unconsciously to the old wound. Couldn't speak for weeks after. When my voice came back, it was different, broken. It's not broken, Eliza said softly. Just careful. He looked at her then, really looked, and something passed between them in the lamplight. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of shared damage. Why did you help me? The question escaped before she could stop it. That day in town, you didn't have to... He considered the question, turning his cup in slow circles. My mother died when I was 12. Consumption. Before she passed, she made me promise to help folks when I could, especially those who couldn't help themselves. Said the strong have a duty to the vulnerable. I'm not vulnerable, Eliza said, some pride stinging. No, he agreed. But you were outnumbered. That's different. They sat in comfortable silence until the clock chimed midnight. As Silas stood to leave, he paused at the door. Lock this behind me, and keep that pistol handy, just in case. You think they'll come here? I think desperate men do desperate things, and whoever's running this operation is getting desperate. 20 head isn't enough to risk hanging for unless you need money fast. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. A small figure on a sway-backed mule approached the ranch, and Eliza recognized Dr. Lee from town. The Chinese physician had treated Thomas after the mine accident, had been kind when others weren't. "Mrs. Quinn," he said, dismounting carefully, "I bring news from town, and a letter." The letter was from Luther Crane at the bank, addressed to Thomas Quinn, dated a month before his death. Eliza's hands trembled as she read the demand for payment on a loan she knew nothing about. "This is forged," she said. "Thomas never borrowed money from the bank. We had savings." "I know, Doctor," Lee said gently. "That's why I brought it. Found it while treating Crane's gout. The ink is wrong, the paper too new, but if you cannot prove it—" "They'll take everything," Eliza finished what little she had left. "Anyway—" Silas appeared. Having seen the visitor, he read the letter, his expression darkening with each line. "Crane," he said simply. "You know something, Doctor?" Lee asked. "I know Luther Crane's been buying land from widows and failed homesteaders for years. Always a convenient debt. Always papers that appear after the husband dies." He handed the letter back to Eliza. "Keep this, we'll need it." "For what?" "Evidence. If Crane's forging documents, he's not stopping with you. And if he's desperate enough to forge papers—" He trailed off. But Eliza understood. Desperate enough to forge papers, desperate enough to steal cattle, desperate enough to destroy anyone who stood in his way. That night, as she helped bandage the calf's leg again, it was healing. Slowly but surely, Eliza made a decision. She wouldn't run. Not this time. Whatever was coming, she'd face it here, with these people who'd shown her kindness when the world offered none. "Getting stronger," Silas observed, watching the calf attempt to stand. "Yes," Eliza agreed. And they both knew they weren't just talking about the animal. Outside, wind howled through the canyon passes, carrying the scent of more snow. Somewhere in that darkness, desperate men plotted desperate acts, but inside the barn, in the circle of lamplight, there was peace fragile as a newborn calf, but growing stronger every day. The storm was coming, but they'd face it together. The second blizzard struck without warning. One moment the sky was merely gray. The next it turned white as a burial shroud. Eliza was in the henhouse when the wind hit, nearly tearing the door from her hands. "Get inside," Mateo's voice, barely audible over the howling wind. He grabbed her arm, half dragging her toward the house as visibility dropped to mere feet. In the kitchen, Naya was already securing windows, her movements quick and practiced. "This is a bad one. Worse than last week." Silas burst through the door, snow swirling around him like a living thing. "Where's Jim and Joaquin?" "Still with the herd in the south pasture," Mateo reported. Silas's jaw tightened. "They know to shelter at the line shack. We've got bigger problems." He turned to Eliza. "Bar the doors. All of them. Now." The urgency in his voice sent ice through her veins that had nothing to do with the storm. "What's happening?" "Saw riders just before the storm hit, moving toward the barn." He checked his rifle. Movements economical. "Wrong night to be traveling. Unless you're planning something that needs cover." As if in answer, a sound cut through the wind, the crash of wood splintering. The barn. "They're after the horses," Mateo breathed. "Or the cattle," Silas finished. "Opening the gates. In this storm, they'll scatter, freeze to death. We'll find them come spring, if at all." He moved toward the door, but Eliza caught his arm. "You can't go out in this." Can't let them destroy everything either. He looked at her hand on his sleeve, something softening in his expression. I have survived worse. Not alone. Mateo checked his own rifle. I'm coming. No. Silas's tone brooked no argument. Stay with the women. If I don't come back. A window shattered in the front room. Eliza reacted without thinking, grabbing Thomas's pistol from her apron pocket. The shot went high, hitting the ceiling, but it served its purpose. Whoever had broken the window ducked back. Well, Silas said dryly, that's one way to say hello. More sounds from outside horses, men shouting, barely audible over the storm. Then Wade Mallory's voice. Drunk or pretending to be, Hart, send out your widow, woman. Got business with her. The only business you've got is with me, Silas called back. Nah, see, that's where you're wrong. Mrs. Quinn owes money. Lots of money. Lucky for her, Mr. Crane's willing to forgive the debt. All she's got to do is sign over her interest in her late husband's claim. Eliza's blood ran cold. What claim Thomas was a miner, not a prospector? Through the broken window, Wade laughed. Funny thing about that, seems old Thomas filed on a piece of land upstream from Skeleton Creek, right where the new survey says there might be copper. Course, claim's no good if his widow can't pay the filing fees. Lies within lies, but clever ones. If Crane had forged loan documents, why not forge a mining claim to create a debt and an asset, then seize both? She's not signing anything, Silas said. Not your choice. Hart, woman's gotta pay her debts. It's the law. Show me the papers. Let Judge Morrison verify them. Can't wait for judges. Storm like this might be weeks before the circuit rider comes through. By then, Wade's voice turned ugly. Well, desperate women do desperate things to survive. Everyone knows that. The implication hung in the air like poison. Eliza felt rage rise in her throat, hot and choking. You're lying, she shouted. All of you, nothing but thieves and liars. See? Wade called to his unseen companions. Hysterical. Clearly needs a man's guidance. Come on out, sweetheart. We'll take good care of you. Silas moved so fast Eliza barely saw it. One moment he was by the window, the next the door was open, and he was gone, swallowed by the white fury outside. The sound of fighting erupted, fists on flesh, grunts of pain, all muffled by the storm. Stay here, Mateo ordered, rushing after him. But Eliza had spent 6 months being told to stay, to wait, to endure, no more. She grabbed Naya's heavy cloak and plunged into the blizzard. The world became a chaos of white and wind. She could barely see 3 feet ahead, but followed the sounds of struggle. A figure loomed out of the snow, one of Wade's men, reaching for her. She swung the pistol like a club, connecting with his jaw. He dropped. Through the swirling snow, she saw them, Silas and Wade, locked in brutal combat. No finesse, no rules, just 2 men fighting with desperate savagery. Wade had size and reach, but Silas fought like a man who'd learned combat in harder schools than frontier brawls. Another figure appeared, heading for the barn despite the fight. If they released the cattle in this weather... Eliza didn't think. She fired into the ground at the man's feet. Next one won't miss. The man froze, hands raised, in the barn. She could hear the cattle lowing anxiously, sensing danger. Wade broke free from Silas, scrambling for something in the snow, a gun. Time slowed. Eliza saw Silas turn, saw Wade's arm rising, saw death in the gesture. She fired. The shot went wide, hitting a fence post, but Wade flinched. It was enough. Silas's fist connected with his jaw, dropping him into the snow. Enough! Mateo's voice cut through the wind. He stood with his rifle trained on Wade's remaining men. Take your boss and go, now, before this storm kills you all. They dragged Wade to his feet, blood streaming from his nose, even beaten. His eyes found Eliza with venomous promise. This isn't over. You can't hide behind Hart forever. Crane owns this county, owns the law. You'll pay what you owe, one way or another. Get out! Silas's voice was granite. Come back and I'll kill you. That's not a threat. It's a promise. They vanished into the storm. Wade supported between two men, in minutes. It was as if they'd never been there at all, except for the blood in the snow and the broken windows singing with wind. Inside, Silas ordered, "Now!" Back in the kitchen, Naya fussed over them all. Silas's knuckles were split, one eye swelling shut. Eliza's hands shook as she helped clean his wounds, reaction setting in. "You could have been killed," she said. "So could you." He caught her hands, stilling their trembling. "That was a brave thing, foolish, but brave." "I couldn't let them?" "I know." His thumb brushed over her knuckles, gentle despite his own injuries. "But next time, aim center mass. A warning shot just makes them mad." "Despite everything?" She laughed, a shaky sound, but real. "I'll remember that." A pounding at the door made them all tense, but it was Father Whitlow's voice that called out, "Silas, let me in before I freeze solid." The priest stumbled inside, frost in his beard, carrying a leather document case. "Thank the Lord you're all safe. I rode through hell to get here." "Father, what?" "Circuit judge is coming early, tomorrow. If the storm breaks, Crane pushed for it, claims there are urgent matters of property to settle." His eyes found Eliza. "He's filed papers saying you abandoned your husband's debts. If you don't appear, he wins by default." "But the storm will break by dawn. I've lived here 40 years. I know the signs." Father Whitlow accepted tea gratefully. "But that's not why I nearly died getting here. I've been going through church records, death certificates, Mrs. Quinn. Your husband's death was recorded as an accident. But I found something. The mine supervisor's report, filed the same day. It suggests the tunnel supports were deliberately weakened." The cup slipped from Eliza's numb fingers, shattering on the floor. "What?" "I can't prove it, but the timing. Thomas discovered something. Didn't he, about the mine's finances, about Crane?" "He said numbers didn't add up," Eliza whispered. "Said someone was skimming, but I told him not to make trouble. We couldn't afford—" She couldn't finish. All this time she'd blamed herself for his death if she hadn't been pregnant, if they hadn't needed the money so badly. Maybe he wouldn't have taken extra shifts, wouldn't have been in that tunnel. "It's not your fault." Silas's voice cut through her spiral. "If someone killed him to keep him quiet, that blood's on their hands, not yours." Father Whitlow nodded. "The question is, can we prove it? Because if we can show Crane capable of murder, then forged documents become the least of his crimes." Outside, the storm began to slacken, as if nature itself was taking a breath before the next act, in hours. They'd have to face Crane in court with whatever evidence they could muster. "I need to ask you something," Silas said quietly, drawing Eliza aside. "This claim Wade mentioned, real or fake, Crane will use it. You need legal standing to fight him." "I don't understand." He took a breath, and she saw him struggle with words that came harder than any fight. "Marry me. Tonight, Father Whitlow can perform the ceremony. As my wife. You'd have protection under law, resources to fight back." The world tilted. "Silas, I'm not asking for— that is, it would be a legal arrangement. Protection. You could leave after— once this is settled. I wouldn't hold you." She studied his battered face. This man who'd fought for her without being asked, who offered marriage like a shield against the world's cruelties. "And if I didn't want to leave after—" Something flickered in his green-gold eyes. "Then you wouldn't have to." From across the room, Father Whitlow cleared his throat. "If we're doing this, it should be soon. Dawn comes early, and we'll need to reach town before court convenes." Eliza looked around the kitchen at Naya's encouraging smile. Mateo's earnest nod, Father Whitlow's patient presence, then back to Silas, who waited without pushing, offering choice where others had tried to take it. "Yes," she said simply, and somewhere in the dying storm, she thought she heard Wade Mallory's mocking words twist into prophecy. A silent, wealthy cowboy saw a widow rejected in town until he took her as his bride forever. But prophecies, Eliza was learning, could be shaped by those brave enough to claim them. The barn had never hosted a wedding before. Lanterns cast warm pools of light against rough-hewn walls, and Naya had somehow procured white ribbons torn from old petticoats. Eliza suspected to soften the utilitarian space. The storm had died to whispers, leaving the world wrapped in pristine white silence. Mateo stood as witness, hat clutched nervously in his hands. From somewhere, he'd produced a wildflower preserved in glass, which he offered to Eliza with touching solemnity. "My mother kept this from her wedding, said it brought luck." "Where's little Millie?" Eliza asked, remembering the orphan girl from town who sometimes helped at neighboring ranches. "Here." The child burst through the barn door, cheeks red from cold, clutching something in her mittened hands. "I made it myself." She held up a ring woven from horsehair rough, but crafted with obvious care. "For Mr. Hart, since proper weddings need rings." Silas knelt to accept the gift, his scarred face gentle. "It's perfect, Millie, thank you." Father Whitlow cleared his throat. "Prayer book open. Shall we begin? Dawn won't wait for ceremony." They stood before him in work clothes, still bearing traces of the night's violence. Eliza's dress was torn at the shoulder. Silas's eye had swollen nearly shut, yet something sacred filled the space between them as Father Whitlow began the familiar words. "Silas, your vows." The big man shifted, struggling with words that came harder than facing down rustlers. He stopped, took a breath, started again. "I promised to keep you safe, to speak up when silence would be cowardice, and stay quiet when words would wound, to treat you as partner, not property, to—" his voice caught, "to be the man you deserve, even if I fall short." Father Whitlow turned to Eliza. "Your vows." She looked up at this complicated man who'd offered her shelter without conditions, protection without ownership. "I promise to stand beside you, not behind you, to be honest when others might flatter, to build a life with you based on respect, not need, and to—" she smiled slightly, "to make better coffee." That startled a laugh from him, rusty but real. The rings. Millie bounced forward with the horsehair band. From his pocket. Silas produced something that made Eliza's breath catch a simple silver ring, worn smooth with age. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "If you'll have it." She held out her hand, noting how it trembled only slightly. The ring fit as if made for her. "Then, by the authority vested in me by the territory of Montana and the Lord above," Father Whitlow intoned, "I pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined, let no man put asunder." In the expectant silence that followed, Silas bent his head toward hers. The kiss was brief, barely a brush of lips, but Eliza felt it like lightning down to her boots. "Now then," Father Whitlow said briskly, closing his prayer book, "let's get you to town before Crane convinces the judge you've fled the territory." As they prepared to leave, ranch hands began arriving. Jim and Joaquin had survived the storm in the line shack, and word of the wedding spread quickly. Cookie, the bunkhouse cook, pressed a flask into Silas's hand. "For warmth." He winked. "Never seen the boss smile so much," one hand whispered to another. Not quite quietly enough. "Never seen him smile at all," came the reply. The ride to town was tense despite the clearing weather. Silas had insisted on bringing several armed men, and their presence turned what might have been a wedding procession into something more like a war party. Eliza rode beside her new husband, acutely aware of every shift in his posture, every scanning glance at the horizon. "Expecting trouble?" she asked. "Always." He adjusted his rifle across his saddle. But especially today, Crane won't like being outmaneuvered. Main Street was busier than usual. Citizens drawn by news of the emergency court session. Eliza felt their stares like physical weight surprise, speculation, and from some quarters, open disapproval. Prudence Bell stood outside the milliner's shop, mouth agape. "Is that?" someone whispered. "Did Hart actually marry her?" "Lord help us all," Prudence muttered, loud enough to carry, "What's next? Pigs flying." But not all reactions were hostile. "Doctor," Lee nodded respectfully from his doorway. "Mrs. Morrison." The general store owner's wife offered a tiny wave when her husband wasn't looking. Even some of Wade's usual drinking companions seemed more curious than condemning. The courthouse, really just the town hall with pretensions, was packed. Judge Morrison, no relation to the storekeeper, sat behind a makeshift bench, looking harried. Luther Crane occupied the plaintiff's table like a spider in his web. Papers spread before him in neat array. His face, when he saw Eliza enter on Silas's arm, was worth the entire terrifying night. "Your Honor," he spluttered, "this is highly irregular." "What's irregular?" Judge Morrison said dryly. "Is calling emergency sessions in blizzards. But since we're all here, let's proceed. Mr. Crane, you've filed claims against Mrs. Hart," Father Whitlow supplied helpfully. "As of about an hour ago. I have the certificate right here." Crane's face went from red to purple. "This is clearly a sham to avoid legitimate debts." "Are you questioning my sanctification of holy matrimony?" Father Whitlow asked mildly. "Because I'd be happy to discuss the sacrament of marriage with you, Luther, at length." "Gentlemen," the judge intervened. "Mr. Crane, present your evidence." Crane produced the loan document with a flourish. "Thomas Quinn borrowed $500 6 months before his death. His widow has refused payment." "Because it's forged," Eliza said clearly. "My husband never borrowed money from Mr. Crane. Women often don't know their husband's business." "I kept our books." She stood straighter. "Every penny in and out. Thomas was saving for," her voice caught, "for our child. He would never have borrowed without telling me." "Then explain this signature, Doctor." Lee rose from the gallery. "If I may approach, Your Honor, I have some expertise in inks and papers from my homeland." The judge nodded. "Doctor." Lee examined the document carefully, producing a magnifying glass from his pocket. "This ink," he announced, "is Coleman's Premium, sold by catalog. It arrived in town 3 months ago. I know because I ordered some myself." "So," Crane demanded. "So this document is dated 8 months ago. Hard to sign with ink that didn't exist yet." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Crane's lawyer, a nervous man from Helena, whispered frantically in his ear. "Furthermore," Dr. Lee continued, "the paper bears a watermark from the Denison Paper Company's new line, also unavailable 8 months ago." "This proves nothing." Crane slammed his hand on the table. "Perhaps the original was damaged and recopied." "Then where is the original?" Silas spoke for the first time, his damaged voice carrying surprising authority. "Surely a careful businessman like you keeps records." Crane's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Mr. Crane, do you have any other evidence of this debt?" "The mining claim." "Ah, yes." Father Whitlow stood again. "About that claim. I've searched the territorial records. No claim was ever filed by Thomas Quinn. However," he produced a paper with theatrical timing, "I did find this interesting document, a claim filed by Luther Crane on the same land, dated 2 days after Thomas Quinn's death." The silence was deafening. "Circumstantial," Crane managed. "Perhaps, but combined with this," Father Whitlow's final paper. "The mine supervisor's report suggesting sabotage in the tunnel where Quinn died. A tunnel that, coincidentally, was directly beneath the land you claimed. Your Honor, Crane's lawyer stood hastily. We request a recess to review. Sit down, Counselor. Judge Morrison's face was granite. Mr. Crane, I find no evidence of legitimate debt. These documents are fraudulent. Moreover, I'm forwarding this matter to the territorial prosecutor for investigation of fraud, and possibly murder. You can't. I can and I have. Sheriff, take Mr. Crane into custody. As the sheriff moved forward, Wade Mallory burst through the courtroom doors. Judge, the Hart Ranch is rustling cattle, I have proof. This session is about debt claims, not cattle, the judge said wearily. But they're connected. Wade was desperate now, seeing his benefactor being arrested. Hart's been using his widow as wife to distract while his men steal cattle. Check the brands. You'll see. Mateo stood up in the gallery. We did check the brands, found Hart cattle with altered marks in the double-bar holding pens. Funny how the running iron used matches the one in your saddlebag, Mallory. Wade went white. You can't search my property without... Didn't need to. Jim drawled from beside Mateo. You dropped it last night when Mr. Hart was teaching you manners. Got your initials carved in the handle and everything. Real thoughtful of you. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Sheriff, seems you'll need more than one set of shackles. Take Mr. Mallory, too. As chaos erupted in the courtroom, Silas drew Eliza outside. The sun was fully up now, turning the snow-covered street into a river of light. Citizens gathered in clumps, discussing the dramatic reversal. A silent, wealthy cowboy saw a widow rejected in town, someone said, and Eliza recognized Cookie's voice. He grinned at them from the courthouse steps, until he took her as his bride forever. Heard that story somewhere. Seems it had a better ending than folks expected. Prudence Bell pushed through the crowd, her face unreadable. Eliza braced for another verbal assault, but the older woman stopped short, seeming to wrestle with words. I was wrong, Prudence said finally, the admission clearly costing her. About you, about many things. She nodded stiffly and retreated, dignity intact if slightly tattered. That's as close to an apology as anyone's ever gotten from her, Doctor, Lee observed. Treasure it. As they prepared to leave town, Millie ran up, clutching something. Mrs. Hart, Mrs. Hart, I made another ring for you, in case the first one wasn't good enough. Eliza knelt to hug the child. The first one was perfect, but I'll treasure this one too. Walking back to their horses, Silas offered his arm. She took it, still marveling at how natural the gesture felt. So, she said quietly, what happens now? He considered the question as he helped her mount. Now we go home, run our ranch, live our lives. He paused, struggling with something. The marriage. I meant what I said. You're free to... Silas. She waited until he looked at her. I meant what I said too. Partners. Something eased in his scarred face. Partners. They rode out of town side by side, their mounted escort falling in behind. The whispers followed them they always would. But now they had a different tone. Not scandal, but something approaching respect. The story had changed in the telling. No longer a desperate widow and a silent rancher, but something more true to people who'd chosen each other in the face of storms both natural and man-made. And if that choice led to something deeper than partnership, something that made even taciturn cowboys smile and bitter women apologize, well, that would be their story to write. The road home stretched before them, white and clean as a blank page. The courtroom had grown stifling despite the winter cold. Judge Morrison called for order as Luther Crane's lawyer made one last desperate attempt. Your Honor, these accusations are baseless. My client is a respected businessman. Your client is a fraud, and possibly worse. The judge cut him off. But you're right about one thing. We need more evidence for the serious charges. He turned to the gallery. This court will reconvene this afternoon. Sheriff Mr. Crane remains in custody, and Mr. Mallory. A commotion outside interrupted him. Through the windows, Eliza saw smoke rising from the direction of the saloon. Then someone screamed, "Fire!" The courtroom erupted. People pushed toward the exits as more cries went up. "The whole block's burning!" Silas grabbed Eliza's arm. "Stay close." Outside was chaos. The saloon was fully ablaze, and already flames leaped to the adjacent buildings. The winter-dry wood caught like kindling. Worse, the Chinook winds that had broken the blizzard now fanned the flames into a monster. "My store," Morrison ran past them. "Everything I own." "The church," Father Whitlow gasped. "All the records." Silas was already moving, shouting orders. "Mateo, get every bucket and barrel at the livery. Jim, Joaquin, we need a fire break. Start pulling down that shed before the fire reaches it." But Eliza had noticed something else. "Silas," she tugged his sleeve, pointing. The jail, the small building that served as the town jail, sat directly in the fire's path. And somewhere inside were Crane and Mallory, and whoever else might be locked up. Silas cursed under his breath. The sheriff was nowhere to be seen, probably trying to save his own property. "Stay here," he told Eliza. "No." She grabbed his arm. "Partners. Remember?" He looked at her for a heartbeat, then nodded. Together they ran toward the jail as others fled the opposite direction. The deputy on duty was young, terrified, fumbling with keys. "Can't get them to work, the heat the metal's expanding." Silas shouldered him aside, examining the lock. The fire roared closer, already consuming the building next door. Smoke rolled thick and choking. "Stand back." Silas grabbed a bench and swung it against the door. Once, twice the wood splintered but held. Here, Eliza had found an axe in the deputy's office. Silas split the door with 3 powerful swings. Inside, 3 cells held prisoners Crane, Mallory, and an old drunk Eliza didn't recognize. "Get them out," Silas ordered the deputy, who finally managed to make the keys work. Crane stumbled out, coughing. For a moment, his eyes met Eliza's, and she saw something unexpected fear. Yes, but also a flicker of shame. "Move!" Silas shoved them all toward the exit as burning debris began falling from the ceiling. They burst out just as the jail's roof caught. Wade Mallory tripped, sprawling in the dirt. The wall beside him groaned, tilting outward. In seconds, it would collapse, crushing him. Eliza saw Silas hesitate. This man had threatened them, attacked their home. Letting him die would solve so many problems. Then Silas moved, grabbing Wade under the arms and hauling him clear just as the wall crashed down where he'd been lying. "Why?" Wade gasped, staring up at him in shock. "Because that's what men do," Silas said simply. "Real men." There was no time for more. The fire had become a living thing, devouring Main Street. But something else was happening. The townspeople were organizing. Eliza saw Dr. Lee directing a bucket brigade. Mrs. Morrison and other women were soaking blankets to beat at spot fires. Even Prudence Bell was there, her fine dress already ruined, hauling water with grim determination. "The water tower," someone shouted. "If we can knock it down, flood the street." "Too dangerous," another voice argued. "The supports are already burning." Silas studied the tower, calculating. "Not the whole thing, just that corner support. Bring it down, controlled. The water flows right into the fire's path." "You're crazy. Hart?" But Mateo was already running for ropes. "Tell us what to do, boss." What followed was controlled chaos. Under Silas's direction, they rigged ropes to the water tower's supports. Men pulled in carefully orchestrated sequence, while others continued the bucket brigade. "Now!" Silas shouted. The support gave way. For a heart-stopping moment, the tower tilted wrong, toward the untouched buildings. Then physics and rope work combined. and it crashed exactly where Silas had planned. Thousands of gallons of water flooded the street, creating a barrier the fire couldn't cross. It wasn't over. They fought for hours more, saving what they could, containing what they couldn't. Eliza worked alongside women she'd thought hated her, their petty differences meaningless in the face of shared disaster. At one point, she found herself beside Wade Mallory, both beating at flames with wet blankets. "Your husband," Wade panted between swings. "He could have let me die." "Yes, I would have let him die. I know." Wade was quiet for a moment. "I was wrong. About you. About a lot of things." Before Eliza could respond, he was gone, running to help shore up another firebreak. But something fundamental had shifted in that admission. As afternoon wore toward evening, the fire was finally contained. Half of Main Street was gone, including the saloon, Morrison's store, and several other buildings. But the church stood, and most of the homes, and no lives had been lost. People collapsed where they stood, exhausted, filthy, but alive, in the strange camaraderie of shared survival. Eliza found herself tending wounds alongside Dr. Lee while Prudence Bell distributed water and what food could be salvaged. "Mrs. Hart," Judge Morrison approached, his judicial robe singed and blackened. "I need to speak with you and your husband." They found a relatively clear spot among the chaos. Luther Crane sat nearby under guard, staring at the ruins of his bank building. "Given the circumstances," the judge began, "I'm making some immediate rulings. Mr. Crane, the evidence against you stands. You'll be transported to Helena for trial on charges of fraud and suspected murder." Crane didn't protest, seemed almost relieved. "Mr. Mallory," the judge continued as Wade approached, "the rustling charges. I'll testify." Wade interrupted. "Tell you everything. Who was involved, how it worked, all of it." He looked at Silas. "I owe him that much." The judge nodded slowly. "That will be taken into consideration. For now, you're released to help with the recovery efforts. Don't make me regret it." As the judge moved away to handle other matters, Father Whitlow approached the Harts. His face was streaked with soot, but his eyes twinkled. "You know," he said conversationally, "in all the excitement, I'm not sure I properly finished the wedding ceremony this morning." "Father?" Eliza asked, confused. "Well, there was that unfortunate interruption. Tell me, have you two had a chance to properly seal your vows with the traditional wedding feast, the community blessing?" "Father," Silas said dryly, "the town is half burned down." "Exactly," Father Whitlow beamed. "And what better time for a celebration of new beginnings, Mrs. Bell, Mrs. Morrison. Come here, please." Before either Hart could protest, the priest had gathered a growing crowd. "Friends, we've faced disaster and prevailed. We've seen enemies become allies, neighbors help neighbors. What better time to properly celebrate the marriage of two people who exemplify those very values?" "Here," Prudence Bell asked, gesturing at the smoky ruins. "Where better they were married in a barn, fought for each other in a courthouse, and saved lives in a fire. Seems fitting to feast among the ashes we'll rebuild from." "Somehow, it happened. From the ruins, people produced what they'd saved. Someone had rescued a ham from a burning smokehouse. Another had a sack of flour that became impromptu biscuits baked in the coals. Morrison's wife had saved preserves. The baker contributed slightly singed pies. As the sun set over the damaged town, the surviving population of Dry Creek gathered in the street. Tables appeared rescued, doors laid over barrels. Someone produced a fiddle, miraculously unharmed. "Speech," people called out. "Let's hear from the groom." Silas stood reluctantly, Eliza's hand in his. He cleared his throat several times, and she could feel his nervousness. "I'm not good with words," he began, voice carrying despite its roughness. But today I saw something. We all did. Saw people choose helping over hating. Saw enemies become, if not friends, then at least neighbors. Saw, he paused, looking down at Eliza. Saw that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. He raised the cup someone had pressed into his hand. To Dry Creek, to rebuilding, to second chances, and to... His voice softened, meant just for Eliza, though all could hear. To my wife, who showed me that silence isn't always strength, and speaking up doesn't mean you're weak. The cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. Later, as the impromptu celebration wound down and people drifted away to salvage what they could from their homes, Eliza and Silas found themselves alone among the cooling ashes. "Did you mean it?" she asked quietly. "What you said?" "Every word." He touched her face gently, thumb brushing away a smudge of soot. "You changed things, changed me. You changed things for me too." She leaned into his touch, gave me a place to stand when the ground kept shifting. Around them, the town lay partially in ruins. Tomorrow would bring the hard work of rebuilding, the complications of insurance and property and starting over. There would be Luther Crane's trial, Wade Mallory's testimony, the long process of justice and recovery. But tonight, in this moment, standing in the ashes of old prejudices and burned assumptions, Eliza Hart felt something she hadn't experienced in so long she'd almost forgotten its name. Hope. And when Silas bent to kiss her, a real kiss this time, not the brief touch from their morning wedding, she tasted that hope on his lips, sweet as spring water after a long drought. "Let's go home," he said against her mouth. "Yes," she agreed. "Let's go home." They walked to their horses hand in hand, leaving behind the smoking ruins and the whispers that had once defined them. Ahead lay Hart Butte Ranch and a life they would build together not from necessity or convenience, but from choice. And if the people of Dry Creek wanted to tell the story of the silent, wealthy cowboy and the rejected widow, well, let them. The truth was better than any tale they could spin. The truth was two people who'd found each other in the storms of life and chosen to stand together against whatever winds might blow. That, Eliza thought as they rode into the star-filled night, was a story worth living. The weeks following the fire transformed Dry Creek in ways no one had anticipated. Where Main Street once stood in rigid judgment, now rose the framework of something new, buildings going up side by side, neighbors helping neighbors regardless of past grievances. Judge Morrison had returned from Helena with news. "Luther Crane confessed," he announced at the town meeting held in the partially rebuilt church. The whole scheme, the forged documents, the rustling operation, even... He paused, looking at Eliza. "Even arranging the accident at the mine. He'll spend the rest of his days in territorial prison." A murmur ran through the crowd. Eliza felt Silas's hand tighten around hers, steady and sure. As for Wade Mallory, the judge continued. In light of his cooperation and his actions during the fire, he's been sentenced to 2 years' labor on public works. He'll help rebuild what was destroyed. Wade stood near the back, hat in hand. He'd been working since dawn every day, hauling timber, clearing debris. The swagger was gone, replaced by something quieter, maybe even honorable. "There's more," Judge Morrison said. "The territorial government has allocated funds for rebuilding, and several mining companies have expressed interest in legitimate claims near Skeleton Creek. This town might just survive after all." After the meeting, Eliza stood outside the church, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. The same women who'd once whispered behind their hands now nodded respectfully, some even stopping to exchange recipes or discuss the new school being planned. Mrs. Hart. Prudence Bell approached, no longer the imposing figure she'd once seemed. "I wonder, that is, we're organizing a ladies' aid society for the widows and orphans affected by the fire. Would you consider joining?" 6 months ago, this woman had called her names in public, Now she stood asking for help, genuine need replacing false pride. "I'd be honored," Eliza said simply. Prudence's relief was visible. "We meet Thursdays, and—" She hesitated, then forged ahead. "I owe you an apology, a real one. I judged without knowing, gossiped without thinking. That's not the Christian woman I claim to be." "We all make mistakes," Eliza offered. "Some of us more than others." Prudence managed a small smile. "Your husband saved Wade Mallory's life when most would have let him burn. That says something about the company you keep, and about you." As Prudence walked away, Silas emerged from the church where he'd been discussing lumber contracts with other ranchers. "Making peace with the enemy?" he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Former enemy," Eliza corrected. "Seems the fire burned away more than buildings." They walked toward their horses, passing the construction sites. Morrison's new store was twice the size of the old one, with a modern glass front. The saloon was being rebuilt too, though with stricter fire codes. Even a small library was planned, funded by donations from across the territory. "Mr. Hart, Mrs. Hart!" Young Millie raced toward them, pigtails flying. Behind her came a woman Eliza didn't recognize, young, tired-looking, with the pale complexion of an eastern city. "This is Miss Sarah Jenkins," Millie announced importantly. "She's come to be our new school teacher. I've been showing her around." "Ma'am," Silas tipped his hat. "Welcome to Dry Creek." "Thank you," Miss Jenkins said softly. "I heard about your town's troubles and recovery. It seemed like a place where someone could start fresh." Another soul seeking second chances. Dry Creek was becoming a beacon for them. "If you need anything," Eliza offered, "please let us know. Hart Butte Ranch isn't far." As they rode home, Eliza reflected on the changes not just in the town, but in herself. The woman who'd stood shivering outside Morrison's store, desperate and ashamed, seemed like a stranger now. In her place was someone stronger, surer, partnered with a man who'd taught her that strength could be quiet and love could be shown in actions more than words. "You're thinking deep thoughts," Silas observed. "Just remembering, 6 months ago I thought my life was over." "Was it?" She considered. "In a way, yes. That life, the desperate widow, the subject of gossip that ended, this life began." They crested the hill overlooking Hart Butte Ranch. The setting sun turned the buildings golden, and Eliza could see Naya in the garden, Mateo working with a young horse, the hands heading in for supper. "Home. Regrets?" Silas asked quietly. "No." She turned in her saddle to look at him fully. "You—" "Only one." At her alarmed look, he continued, "That it took so long to find you." The simple honesty of it made her throat tight. "Silas Hart, are you becoming romantic?" "Maybe." That almost smile played at his scarred mouth. "You're a bad influence." "Someone has to be." They were still laughing when they reached the house, where Naya waited with news. "Letter came from Helena. That lawyer, the nervous one who worked for Crane. He sent papers." Inside, Silas read the documents while Eliza looked over his shoulder. Her breath caught. "Thomas's life insurance," she whispered. "Crane had blocked the payment, but now—" $500, Silas read, "plus interest. I can pay you back now. For the supplies, the clothes." "Eliza," he set the papers aside, taking her hands. "You're my wife. What's mine is yours. Use the money however you want. Then I want to help rebuild the town. Maybe start a fund for miners' widows, so they don't end up—" She gestured helplessly. "Like I was." "That's a fine idea." He pulled her closer. "Have I told you today that I'm proud to be your husband?" "Not in words," she teased. "Well then," he cleared his throat dramatically. Silas Hart, am proud to be husband to Eliza Hart, who shoots rustlers and fights fires and makes terrible coffee." She swatted his arm. It's improving. And who taught a broken-down soldier that some battles are worth fighting, and some silences are worth breaking. The next morning brought another surprise. Wade Mallory appeared at their gate, hat literally in hand. "I'm not staying," he said quickly when Silas appeared, hand instinctively near his rifle. "Just needed to say something." They waited. "I was wrong. About everything. The rustling, the threats, He swallowed hard. "The disrespect to your wife. I'm sorry. That's not worth much. But it's true." "What do you want, Mallory?" Silas asked, not unkindly. "Nothing, just when my sentence is done. I'm heading to California, starting over. Figured I owed you the truth first." He looked directly at Eliza. "You're a lady, Mrs. Hart. I should have seen that from the start." After he left, Eliza and Silas stood in comfortable silence. "People can change," she observed. "Some people," he wrapped an arm around her. "Others just finally show who they really were all along." The courthouse sessions resumed the following week, but now they dealt with hope instead of accusations, mineral rights, business licenses, property claims, the legitimate kind. Eliza attended one session to file paperwork for the Miners' Widows Fund. As she waited, she overheard two women talking. "You hear about the Hart wedding?" Eliza tensed, old habits dying hard. "Beautiful ceremony, I heard, even if it was in a barn." "Everything the Harts do is unconventional. But look how it turns out. That ranch is thriving, the town's rebuilding. And have you ever seen a couple more devoted?" "My Henry says Silas Hart smiles now. Actually smiles. Never thought I'd see the day." Love does that to a man. The right kind of love. Eliza slipped away before they could see her, cheeks warm but heart full. That evening, she found Silas in the barn with the calf they'd saved months ago, now a healthy young heifer, legs straight and strong. "Remember when you said not everything can be fixed?" she asked, joining him at the stall. "I do." "You were wrong." She leaned into his side. "Some things can't be fixed because they were never truly broken. They just needed time to heal." He was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in that careful way of his. "When I came back from the war, I thought my life was about enduring, surviving, getting through each day. And now I know it's about living, building, growing things, cattle, crops, communities." He turned to face her fully. "Families." The word hung between them, full of possibility. "Silas, I know we married for protection, but somewhere along the way, it became real for me, more real than anything." He touched her face gently. "If you're willing, I'd like to try for more than partnership. I'd like to try for everything." "Everything." "Love, children, years of terrible coffee and better tomorrows." She laughed, eyes damp. "Yes, to all of it, even the coffee." As if in response to their joy, the heifer lowed softly, nudging their joined hands with her nose. Outside, night settled over Hart Butte Ranch. In town, hammers had fallen silent for the day, but tomorrow they'd ring out again, building the future one board at a time. The old dry creek, rigid, judgmental, unforgiving, was gone. In its place rose something better, a community that had learned the hard way that redemption was possible, that people could change, that love could grow in the most unlikely soil. And at the heart of it all, a story that had become legend. A silent, wealthy cowboy saw a widow rejected in town, until he took her as his bride forever. Except now the people who told it understood it wasn't just about him taking her as his bride. It was about two people taking each other, choosing each other, saving each other in all the ways that mattered. The story had become truth, and the truth, as Eliza had learned, was always better than the legend. Spring arrived like a miracle after the brutal winter, painting the Montana landscape in shades of green that made the heart lift. Eliza stood on the porch of Hart Butte Ranch, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching the world come alive again. "Counting cattle or clouds?" Silas asked, joining her with 2 cups of coffee, his drinkable now, after months of patient teaching. "Both. Neither." She accepted the cup gratefully. "Just thinking how different everything looks when you're not afraid anymore." He wrapped an arm around her, hand settling protectively over hers on her stomach. "No more fear." "Oh, there's still fear, but it's different now. Good fear, will I be a good mother? Will the ranch weather the market changes? Normal fears, not the desperate kind. You'll be a wonderful mother." His voice held that quiet certainty she'd come to treasure. "Already are. Really? Look at Millie." The girl had become a fixture at the ranch, helping Eliza with her Sunday kitchen that fed the poor and displaced. What started as a few meals had grown into a community institution, with donations coming from unexpected sources. "Mrs. Hart." Millie herself appeared around the corner, braids flying. "The first wagons are here." Sunday dinner had become quite the production. Eliza made her way to the expanded kitchen, where Naya already commanded the stove like a general. The older woman had taken on 2 assistants, wives of new ranch hands Silas had hired from among the fire victims. 32 today, Naya reported, including the Newton family, just arrived from Kansas. Through the window, Eliza could see them, a young couple with 3 children, the unmistakable look of people who'd gambled everything on a new start. She remembered that feeling too well. "Make sure they get extra," she said, "and see if Mr. Newton knows anything about cattle. Silas mentioned needing more hands for the spring drive." The transformation of Hart Butte Ranch reflected the changes in Dry Creek itself, where once suspicion and gossip ruled. Now there was cautious community. Not perfect perfection wasn't human nature, but better, kinder. Mrs. Hart. Sarah Jenkins, the schoolteacher, appeared in the doorway. "Might I have a word?" They stepped onto the porch where Sarah twisted her hands nervously. "I need advice about Wade Mallory." Eliza's eyebrows rose. "Wade?" "He's been helping repair the schoolhouse, working twice as hard as the other men, staying late to sand the desks smooth so the children won't get splinters." Sarah's cheeks pinked. "Yesterday he asked if he might call on me when his sentence is complete." "And you said?" "I didn't know what to say. His reputation. But then people say things about your reputation too, and they're wrong. So perhaps people can change." Eliza finished gently. Or perhaps the Wade Mallory who terrorized the town was never the real man, just someone lost and angry who needed a reason to find himself. "Do you think I'm foolish to consider it?" "I think you're brave, and I think Wade Mallory is smart enough to recognize quality when he sees it." Eliza smiled. "Trust your instincts, but make him earn your regard. Real change shows itself in consistent actions, not just words." After Sarah left, Silas found Eliza in the kitchen garden, planting herbs for summer. "Matchmaking now?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Observing, "There's a difference." She sat back on her heels, studying him. "You have that look. What's happened?" "Letter from the territorial governor. They want me to consider running for county commissioner, Luther Crane's old position." Eliza's hand stilled on the rosemary shoots. "Commissioner, but that would mean speaking at meetings, public positions, being visible instead of just—" He gestured vaguely. "Silent." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. Wanted to talk to my wife first." He helped her to her feet as she struggled with her changing balance. It would mean changes. More time in town, more politics, more people wanting favors. But also more influence to help, to make sure what happened to Thomas, to me, to others, that it doesn't happen again. He nodded slowly. "That's what I was thinking. But Eliza, I'm not a speech maker. You know how I am with words. I know you speak when it matters, and what you say carries weight because you don't waste words on meaningless things." She touched his face, tracing the scar that no longer seemed like a wound, but just part of him. The county needs someone who thinks before speaking, who acts with integrity, who judges based on actions, not appearances. You think I should accept? I think you already know what you want to do. You just need to hear that I'll stand with you. Always. Always. That evening, as the Sunday dinner guests departed with full stomachs and fuller hearts, Dr. Lee lingered. I have news, he said quietly. My nephew in San Francisco has agreed to come and set up practice here, a real hospital. Mrs. Hart, with proper supplies and trained nurses. That's wonderful, Eliza exclaimed. The town needs... She stopped, seeing his expression. What is it? I'm old, he said simply, and tired. Once my nephew is established, I plan to return to China, to die where I was born. He raised a hand before she could protest. This is not sad. This is completing a circle. But before I go, I wanted to thank you. Thank me, Dr. Lee. You've done so much. You and your husband showed this town that change was possible, that people could be more than their worst moments. That's a kind of medicine I could never provide. He patted her hand gently. Name your child something strong. He or she will inherit a better world than we did. As spring deepened towards summer, the changes became even more evident. The new Dry Creek boasted wider streets, fire prevention, a proper bank run by honest men from Helena, and businesses owned by people who would have been run out of town a year ago. Even the gossip had changed. Where once whispers carried poison, now they carried news whose daughter was courting, whose son had gotten into college back east, whose cattle were producing the best calves. You hear about the Harts? Eliza overheard in Morrison's new store. Donated lumber for the church expansion. That's nothing. Heard Silas Hart's teaching the younger ranchers about sustainable grazing, sharing knowledge his father kept secret. And Eliza Hart's kitchen feeds half the county on Sundays. My cousin came all the way from Billings after hearing about it. A remarkable couple. You know what they say, a silent, wealthy cowboy saw a widow rejected in town. Until he took her as his bride forever, the other woman finished. Best thing that ever happened to both of them. And to this town. Standing in the pickle aisle, Eliza allowed herself a small smile. The story had taken on a life of its own, becoming less about scandal and more about redemption. Eavesdropping. Mrs. Commissioner. Silas appeared beside her, having just finished meeting with the town council about road improvements. Listening to our legend grow, she corrected. Apparently, we're quite the tale. Let them talk, as long as they're talking about road grades and grazing management, too. He looked at her with concern. You're tired. Home. The ride back to Hart Butte was peaceful, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. As they crested the final hill, Eliza gasped. Silas, look! The pastures were full of new calves, the success of careful breeding and winter management. The expanded barn gleamed with fresh paint. The garden had tripled in size to support the Sunday kitchens. And there, sitting on the porch, were their friends Mateo teaching Millie to play guitar, Naya shelling peas with the new cook, even Father Whitlow enjoying the sunset. When did we build this? Eliza asked softly. Build what? A life, a real life, with family and purpose and... She stopped, overcome. One day at a time. Silas said, one choice at a time, one act of courage leading to another. As they dismounted, Millie ran to meet them. Mr. Hart, Mrs. Hart. Guess what, Miss Jenkins and Mr. Mallory are officially courting. He asked her father and everything. Speaking of building lives, Silas murmured, that night, as they lay in their bed, their true marriage bed now, not the careful arrangement of those early days, Eliza felt the baby move strongly. He's restless tonight, Silas said, hands spread over her belly. She, Eliza corrected. And she's not restless. She's eager, ready to see this world we're making. What if we fail? What if the town slides back? Or the ranch struggles? Or... Then we'll face it, together, the way we've faced everything else. She turned in his arms to look at him. I was alone and desperate when you found me. You were silent and isolated when I found you. Look at us now. I love you, he said simply. Have I mentioned that today? Only 5 times. You're slipping. He laughed full and rich, the sound of a man who'd found his voice in all the ways that mattered. Can't have that. I love you, Eliza Hart. I love our life. I love who we've become together. And I love you, Silas Hart, my silent cowboy who speaks volumes without words. Outside, night settled over Montana territory like a benediction. In the bunkhouse, cowboys shared stories and songs. In town, families settled into homes rebuilt from ashes. At the schoolhouse, Wade Mallory carefully carved Sarah's initials into a desk he was building as a courtship gift. And at Hart Butte Ranch, 2 people who'd found each other in the depths of winter held tight to the spring they'd created together. Their story had become legend, but their life was beautifully, blessedly real. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, commissioner duties, baby preparations, the constant work of ranch and community. But tonight, there was peace. The kind bought not with silence or isolation, but with courage, compassion, and the choice to see people for who they could become rather than who they'd been. We never did get our wedding night, Silas mused. What with arrests and fires and general chaos. Every night is our wedding night now, Eliza replied. We just keep choosing each other, over and over. Forever, forever. And in the Montana darkness, under stars that had witnessed so much change, that promise held all the weight of truth. A silent, wealthy cowboy had indeed seen a widow rejected in town. But the real story, the better story, was everything that came after that moment. The choices, the chances, the courage to build something beautiful from the ashes of what was. That was their story, and it was just beginning. And thank you so much for listening to this story of love, redemption, and second chances in the Old West. I hope Eliza and Silas's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it with you. I'd love to hear where you're listening from, whether you're in bustling city or quiet countryside, across the oceans or right here in America. Please share your thoughts in the comments below and tell me which part of their story resonated with you most. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more authentic frontier stories that capture the spirit of courage and hope that built the American West. Don't forget to hit that like button, and if you really want to help other listeners discover these stories, please click the hype button to spread the word. Until next time, keep riding towards your own sunset, and remember, sometimes the best stories begin when we think they're ending.